What up, y'all? It's Friday, it's the 27th of April, and this is what I've been learning. This week, I've been reading this wonderful book from 1886. It's by an Austrian physicist called Ernst Mach. Quite a well known physicist. He really influenced Albert Einstein, for example, really influenced William James. Mach was like such a badass. He wrote this book called The Analysis of Sensations. The reason I'm so interested in this book is that it had a big influence on William James, and via William James, it had a big influence on Bertrand Russell. Mach wanted to find the relationship between the findings that he'd been making in the physical world, in the realm of physics, and the psychological events that we experience, which is where William James got this conclusion that I talked about the other week, is that basically the whole world is made up of experience. He called these experiences sensations, and the German word is Empfindungen. So sensations, maybe impressions is another translation, but he says we experience these things as sensations, but the world is made up of these properties, right? Things like colors, pressures, temperatures, spaces, things like that. We experience them. Sometimes they're mental sensations. Sometimes we experience them as physical sensations when we interact with the world. These different elements, basically, are what create the entire world. And when living things experience them, we have a point of view, we have a subjectivity about them. And the elements are interacting with one another in different ways, and that's how they create the molecules, the atoms, subatomic particles that all material things are made out of, but also they create light waves and photons and sound waves and everything in the universe, and they just kind of come together in different combinations, and some of those combinations are living beings, some of those combinations are rocks. They just play in these different ways. I find it a really cool way of looking at the world because it makes it a lot easier to understand how mental processes can have an effect on the physical body. Usually the way most people think of it, the physical system is just something that's a closed system. Only physical things can have an effect on other physical things. But it's quite clear that mental processes do have an effect on our bodies. If I think of an anxious thought, for example, my body will have physical responses to that anxious thought. And vice versa. If I make my body really tense, or if I tap my foot repeatedly, eventually that will bring me into a more anxious mental state. And so this way of looking at the world makes it easier to see how all of these things interact. Another thing that I find really fascinating is that this book that he's written is so poignant in terms of an understanding of how an individual sense of self comes about. And this is, in a way, quite controversial for a yogi, because a lot of yoga, for example, in the Upanishads, these ancient texts on which a lot of yoga is based, and certainly in the Yoga Sutras, there's this belief that each individual has an individual essence and has this transcendental soul. But actually, a lot of the introspecting that I've been doing and a lot of the research that I've been doing has more and more led me to this feeling that maybe there is no eternal transcendental essence that I have. Maybe it's just all a kind of a collection of impressions, a collection of sensations. And I've often spoken about the fact that our mind is not something that stays the same. Our opinions change over the course of a lifetime so drastically that when we look back on what was important to us 10 years ago or 20 years ago, for example, that's not the same at all as what's important to us now. Our cells are constantly creating new versions of themselves, and even the molecules, the atoms that make up our body, are constantly in flux. So the body that I have now is not the same body that I had 10 years ago. On a molecular level, on a cellular level, the only point of continuity is from one moment to the next. So this moment, the present moment, is the only thing that connects what's come before and what's going to happen next. And it seems to create this sense of stability that isn't really there, because even objects that seem to have more stability than the human body does, for example, are not eternal. Obviously, they have come from somewhere. It used to be a different combination of atoms, and they are going to turn into a different combination of atoms as well. I posted a video about how caterpillars turn into butterflies. A friend of mine, Kate, she mentioned on the video, she was like, the thing that the video doesn't mention is that when the caterpillar goes into the chrysalis, it's not like its legs and its body slowly transform into the body of the butterfly. No, it turns into goo, and then that goo turns into the butterfly, and the butterfly emerges from the chrysalis. So like, it just completely breaks down and then is something new. My brother had told me that before, and it's one of the things that has really led me to this view of life, that it's all just a dance of arranging and breaking down and rearranging, and the way that we experience that is through the impressions that we have, through the experiences that we have. But the only sure experiences that we have are the ones that are happening in this very moment, whether it's the sensory experiences or the mental impressions that we're creating. The only ones that we can be sure of that have any salience are the ones that are happening right now. And I just wanted to read this passage from the book, from The Analysis of Sensations from Mach. I read this and was just so blown away by how this physicist was able to put this perspective into words. The primary fact is not the I, the ego, but the elements, sensations. The elements constitute the I. I have the sensation green, signifies that the element green occurs in a given complex of other elements, sensations, memories. When I cease to have the sensation green, when I die, the elements no longer occur in their ordinary, familiar way of association. That is all. Only an ideal mental economical unity, not a real unity, has ceased to exist. Now, that's some hardcore Buddhist shit right there. It's really incredible the way that he's able to break down this preconception that we have of something continuous and something that's so precious, and help us to recognize, well, actually, no, it's all in flux, and there's nothing to hold on to. No matter how hard we try, we won't be able to hold on to it. And for me, rather than believing in some essence that I have to live up to, and just taking it as it goes, just recognizing that it's all just coming and going, and that there's nothing that I need to hold on to, is such a relief. It's such a, and I know I said that same thing when I was talking about realizing that I wasn't able to control a lot of the things that I can't control, but it's all kind of related, these two things, the sense of I can't control other things, and I also there's no need to live up to some ideal version of myself, because there is no ideal. It's just all a dance. And that is, I think, so much more enlightening than trying to become my real self or whatever it is. Because that real self is just who I am right now. And that, for me, is magical. Because I can walk around and just be like, you know what? What I am, who I am, is how I feel when I'm looking at this flower, or how I feel when I'm talking about the things that I'm interested about, how I experience the sensations in my body, just when I'm sitting around or lying around or reading a book or whatever, how I see the visual dance of images in my mind when I'm thinking about something. That's all I am. There's nothing more. And that is so much more sustainable, that's so much more accessible, and it's so much more alive to me than the idea of some invisible essence that I should aspire to become. And that's where I am. That's where everything I've experienced so far in my life has led me. And it's a really good place. I recognize that not having an essence might sound like a scary thing to some people, but so far for me, it's a lot less scary and it's a lot more fun. I hope you can take something from that. I always enjoy these little chats that I have with you, feel free to chat back. I'm always happy to hear anything that you might have to say. But in the meantime, enjoy your moment. Enjoy the sensations that you're having with yourself right now and with the world. They won't last forever by any means, so take them while you can. And while you're at it, be wonderful to each other. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.